Welcome, everyone, to the Chris Perish podcast, where we are celebrating episode 26. And before we get to our guest of the day, I just want to make sure that we give a great thanks and a shout out to our working affiliate, Turnbuckle Studios. Make sure you're checking out all the great content at Turnbuckle Studios every Monday night with the Raw Patrol, where they survey the scene. The wrestling scene, that is, every Monday night, and then followed by Turnbuckle Talk at 8:05 Eastern with guest host Carl Carafel and Chris Best. And then you also want to check out all of the other great content they provide. And we also want to give a good thanks to our financial sponsor, that is Rogue Energy, right there at the bottom there. And if you want to make sure you get your energy fill, you go to rogueenergy.com. You go and you browse that catalog and you do everything you can to get what you want, because there's a lot of great flavors. I prefer the blue raspberry. But if you want to save 10%, well, guess what? I have something for you. When you get in that shopping cart, you want to hit that promo code. Make sure you hit the promo code PERISH, PERISH. You save that 10%. Why? Because I care about you. So you make sure that you get a little bit of a kickback. I get a little bit of kickback. And guess what? We just made each other happy. So thank you, everyone. But you're not here for that. You're not here for all the stuff that I legally have to get through. You're here for the guest, the guy that I have here in store. That is the host of the Worst Sports Channel. That is Jack Lucenay. Jack, how are you doing today?
Man, I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And I got to say, I loved your intro. And, I think it was the mango pineapple that was speaking to me out of your sponsors there. So shout out to Rogue Energy.
There you go. A little bit of a second opinion, if you will. But yeah, Jack, you're kind of new to the Chris Perish podcast. Obviously, this is your first time. We got a couple comments coming in. Well, one, we got Chris Best, good friend of the show, coming in saying, "Good afternoon, guys. Hope you're having a great Sunday." We are. But Jack, take the time out of your right now to let everybody know a little bit about you, because we all know that you're part of the Worst Sports Channel. But what exactly is the Worst Sports Channel?
So it's me. Quite literally, when you actually look it up, everything's just under my name. It's very much a hobby channel. I think a lot of people get into it kind of, from a business-minded approach. That ain't it for me. There's no ads, there's no sponsors on my show. And that's because it's like a video journal. To me, it's like whether I was doing it to 0, 100, or 1,000 people, it doesn't matter. I'm just a huge fantasy football nerd, huge pro wrestling nerd. I live in Quebec, Canada, pretty far up north, so I don't really have a lot of people to talk to about it here. So for me, it was very much just kind of a cathartic way to get my thoughts out into the world. And it's been kind of a trip, because I started the interview show, which is the worst interview, almost a year ago. And we've had a guest every single week since, including Chris, who is nice enough. His episode will come out after this in the future, a couple weeks from now. But man, I'm going to the Fantasy Football Expo this year in Canton, Ohio, which is like a Comic-Con for fantasy football. And I'm super excited because I get to meet 40, 50 people that I've had the pleasure of having on my show. So there's the Worst Interview Show. I do the fantasy football stuff. It's Worst Fantasy Show. And then the wrestling on the Worst Wrestling Podcast. I do a lot of just reviews, reactions to stuff going on during the week. And one of my favorite segments, or I guess I do short episodes, is I do bonus reviews of old pay-per-views. And those seem to be the most popular. And for me, they're honestly the most fun, because I get to go back and watch old pay-per-views.
Now, I kind of want to dive into the football thing, because that's something that we try to do a little bit here on the Chris Perish podcast. But also, well, let's face it, I'm a nerd when it comes to drafts. I'm a nerd when it comes to fantasy football. I think I've been doing it for close for 12, 13 years now, if not a little longer. But you have the number one pick. Is it safe to say Christian McCaffrey is that guy?
No.
Then who are you taking?
It depends entirely on your league and your league format. So in a simple redraft, and you have 2 running back, 2 wide receiver in your build, fine. Go with Christian McCaffrey. It's probably the safest pick. In Dynasty, that immediately changes right away to I'm taking either a wide receiver, or honestly, if I'm going to go running back, I'm going to take Bijan Robinson because I'm projecting him to get to Christian McCaffrey's level while Christian McCaffrey is going to be entering his decline within the next 2 years. And then if you change even to a redraft, but now there's 3 wide receiver slots,
Yeah.
2, like I'm going to take CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase, depending which one I prefer. For me, it's CeeDee Lamb is the more consistent one, I feel like. So like again, I'm very much an advocate of you take what the board gives you. You don't just force the pick in. Just because you're in a league doesn't mean you should take Christian McCaffrey 101. In fact, I'm doing a dynasty startup right now where he went at 208. And it was me who picked him because I was planning. I took Jalen Hurts. It's a super flex league, which means 2 quarterbacks. So I took Jalen Hurts with my first pick. I planned on taking AJ Brown, but CMC was staring me in the face, so I just did it.
Yeah. Well, and I always have the thought process too when you're putting your lineup together. Not so much in the draft, but when you're putting your lineup together, a lot of people try to counter other players on the thing. And my thing is, I'm just trying to get as many points as humanly possible. I'm not too worried necessarily about the counter. Yes, sometimes if the guy's playing, say, Jared Goff, and you have Sam Laporta, you're like, okay, well, I can counter some of his points, obviously, with Sam Laporta, because whatever he throws, if it's a passing touchdown, that's 4 points. Sam's getting 6, so I counter plus a gain. And you got to think about that too. But at the same time, my job from the get-go is to make sure that I get as many points as possible. Are you in agreement with that, or is there a different strategy that you like to have when you play?
No, see, I love discussing things like that because those are concepts that I call common misnomers. So they're things that are commonly believed in the fantasy football world that just actually are not true. And I'll tell you, it's for 2 reasons. For one, that's a very old style of point system where a quarterback is only getting 4 points per passing touchdown compared to the 6 receiving points. Most leagues nowadays have gone to where quarterbacks are getting 6 passing points per touchdown. So you're not getting the same value that you once were by trying to mitigate the risk. But even then, it's so easy for Jared Goff to just not target Sam Laporta that game and use Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs. So just because you put that player in doesn't mean you're actually mitigating any risk. And meanwhile, you could be ignoring a perfect example is you could be ignoring a better matchup. And I'll give you an example of last year. I was a huge proponent of Trey McBride. I told people Trey McBride is going to be overlooked. He's going to go really late in drafts. Make sure he's on your roster because he is a guy that I don't see Zach Ertz lasting the whole season. He's going to ascend to being possibly even the primary target on this team. Like if, it's him in Hollywood at that point, if you're looking back on last year. And it's like, you could have easily had Sam Laporta, who was a rookie and drafted kind of late. And I actually said I liked him better than Dalton Kincaid because of, a couple different intangibles, but also the landing spot. And so if you had both of those players on your roster and you saw that you were going against Jared Goff and you put in Sam Laporta to mitigate that risk, but you didn't play Trey McBride, then, you lost points. And that's not even, again, considering the fact that Goff sucks on the road. So if you played it and it was a road game, there was no really risk to even mitigate. You kind of did it for no reason. So you have to really, again, take those things as they come and really think them through and not just go with the common nomenclature.
Yeah. Now, when I'm posing these questions, I'm not saying these are the things I'm doing, but when I say 4 and 6, that's generally the average to a lot of new. If you're new to fantasy football, you tend to probably be playing those kinds of things, especially from the people that I'm aware of. They tend to play more of the slower games, not so much the more advanced type scoring systems. They're just trying to get their feet wet. Now, what is your favorite setup? Is it a 2 quarterback league? Is it a super flex? If you were to create a league and bring people in, what is your format for roster size?
So for me, I have a couple different leagues, and it's because I feel like we're too late in the game now to just have one league anymore. That feels very again, you talk about 4-point scoring for quarterbacks. Another old thing is almost nobody I know that plays, unless they are new players, has one league anymore. Because usually if you start with one, you kind of get the bug and you end up doing at least 3 to 5, I would say. I'm not saying everyone does 20 like I do, but so for beginners, I always say just do a standard redraft league. What that means is you're playing with one quarterback, typically 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, a tight end, maybe a flex, well, always a flex spot, maybe 2 to 3 flex spots, and then kicker and defense, and you have bench spots. And you draft those players on your team, and redraft means that every year the league resets. You're drafting all new players for your team every year. Keeper is a version of redraft where it's similar, but you get to pick 3 players on your roster that you get to keep for the next year. And Dynasty is everything I just said, but there's no other draft. You get one startup draft, and then that's your team forever. And you play as many years as the league lasts, and some will last only a year or 2 and then dissolve. Some have lasted 40 years and are still going that I am aware of. So different strokes for different folks, but obviously getting into a dynasty startup, you need to have at least some kind of knowledge. So I always recommend redraft. Again, simple redraft leagues. You can find them all over the place for free. This isn't really the time of year for it, but that's why I would say the other format that I highly recommend is Best Ball. Best Ball is by far the simplest version of fantasy. So primarily there's 2 big companies right now. There's other ones, but we're in Canada also, so accessibility is a thing. The 2 biggest ones for us is going to be Underdog, shout out Underdog, and Drafters Fantasy, which I literally just did a show, which will air tomorrow morning for a Drafters fantasy draft. So Best Ball, you're doing just the draft, and then it just will automatically set the lineups and take the best scores for the year, and you accumulate points throughout the year, and you win towards the end of the year. Now, what's great about that is you can just do a bunch of drafts this time of year, and you don't have to manage any of those teams, and you have the chance. It's like you're putting in entries to win chances at like literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, to literally like the first prize is like $1 million. So that's what I do this time of year, is just lots and lots of Best Ball. You get very familiar with all the player names, where they usually go. And by the time you get to redraft season, you will have seen like guys' values changed so much during the summer because of so many reasons, whether it's departing from a team, having a bad training camp, hype on a rookie play. There's so many reasons that guys change in draft position by the time we get to most redraft leagues, which again are the reset easy ones that you want to start with to begin. That's going to start around late August, early September. That's going to go through the regular season, and then that's it. And Dynasty, it's year round, baby. That's why, the hardcores are really into the Dynasty stuff, because it never stops.
Yeah. We got a question from Chris Best, and he says, as someone who doesn't quite understand how fantasy football works, what would you recommend for beginners who might be interested into it? And I wanted to ask you, because I know you kind of talk a lot about that, and I think you saw the comment, and that's why you kind of went on a little bit. I also want to ask you, do you prefer, maybe Chris, if he's getting into that, would you suggest mock drafts just so he can get familiar not only with the process, but also understanding where players are, seeing what maybe trends are coming up, just so you're aware? How are mock drafts in your eyes? Are they helpful, or are they something that you just do for fun, or even both?
Just going even a little bit deeper on what I had just said before about how to start really in fantasy football. So just assuming like I'm a football fan, you have to be a football fan to a degree. Otherwise, it doesn't really even make sense to start. So let's start there. Be a fan of the NFL, okay? Even just in a general sense, you don't have to have like a favorite team, but just in a general sense, you should like watching football. Okay, let's start at the very basics. But then the biggest thing that you're going to find is you're going to have to choose an app from the start. And there's different apps to play fantasy football on. For a beginner, I'm going to tell you to go to Sleeper. It's the best fantasy football app in terms of how to operate it and where you're going to find leagues like that. So the easiest thing to do is, number one, go on YouTube and start following some podcasts. Literally like any fantasy football podcast off the top of my head, just to shout out some random ones. Big Draft Energy, Caleb Niemi, Fantasy Football Hustler, FF Universe. Just again, when you start following these accounts on YouTube and then also on Twitter is where a lot of the action happens, you'll find that they will often have leagues that open up for people. And a lot of them are free leagues that are, fun, active, and easy to try for the first time. And they're designed that way. Even another one, if you're interested in best ball, for example, shout out to Dave Kluge, Kluge. Go find him on Twitter. He literally runs a bunch of best ball, like private best ball drafts on Underdog, where you can go in. They're very low entries, so like $3 to $5, and you can learn how to play. And he will literally give tips and literally teach you how to play best ball so that you get better, and then you can kind of go off on your own in some of these bigger contests. But just pulling it back a little bit, Twitter, Facebook fantasy groups, you're going to want to go in and find the guys that are commissioning and looking for players in free redraft leagues that are 10 to 12 teams on Sleeper. And that's it. You join those leagues, maybe max 2 for your first time. Like usually I would say 1. You might find that you get a little antsy if you only have 1 and they're free so if you want to do 2, max 3, like, okay, fine. If you're really going to go heavy, but like usually I would say 1 or 2, and you just start there. And then you'll find that you'll start to learn at your own comfort rate, and you'll start adding these. And I haven't even begun to go into like the intricacies of fantasy football. Like we've been talking about super basic stuff that it goes as deep as there's guys running fantasy leagues for college football at this point. So it's like there's a whole depth of playing that you will probably never get to. Because even me, I've been playing for, Chris, you mentioned you've been playing for 13 years. I've been playing since I was 20, so for 14 years now. So it's just one of those things of I've never tried to do, like, they're called Devy leagues, so or campus to camp, where you're like trying to draft a guy in college to then play in the NFL. There's guillotine leagues, there's vampire leagues, there's just all kinds of there's eliminator leagues, there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. So again, start with just the basic 10 to 12 man redraft on Sleeper, easy peasy. And the way to find them again is through Facebook groups, Twitter, Discords, that kind of thing that you'll find through watching people's content.
Yeah, and that's just it. I think in today's day and age now, if you want to find something, there's always somewhere to find it. You just have to get the right tools, maybe the right directions once in a while to go look for it, but there's always something. And if people are wondering, oh my God, I do not understand a single word this guy is saying, just remember, this is how I feel when I'm hearing people talking about like Dungeons and Dragons, where I don't have a single clue on that kind of stuff. This is my geek stuff as well. So I'm very much enjoying this. I'm even like loving kind of how you think, because let's be honest, you can play a basic league or you could join a league. There's always that 1 or 2 people that play 10 times above their level just because they want to flex on everybody who's starting out. I'm not saying that's you, but it's always a thing.
It's so funny that you compared it to Dungeons and Dragons, because I have literally made that comparison multiple times on my show. I've literally even put out a short on my channel joking about how much fantasy football is just Dungeons and Dragons for football nerds, because it is. That's what it is. And I try to explain to people, every league is different. So trying to explain to someone like your league is going to operate almost in its own little unique snowflake way compared to every other league. And so when I'm giving information, a lot of it is in generalities, but yeah, it is Dungeons and Dragons, but for football nerds.
Yeah. So I got to ask, because my record is 19 leagues in 1 year. What is the most you've done?
So I mean, last year I ran 20, and that was me cutting back. So the most I've ever done in a single year was something like, and I'm not, and it's funny because like this is low, but I've done 30 some odd. I was at 30. I think the year before I had like 35 leagues or something ridiculous. And they were the problem was it wasn't just that I had that many leagues, that they were spread across multiple apps. And so the biggest thing that I did was I condensed it, where I said I had to basically quit or convert every league that was on Yahoo or ESPN or NFL.com. I was like, guys, we're going to sleeper. Like we're going to sleeper or I'm out. That is basically what it is. And I got it down to, I'm in about 20 leagues now, and every single league I have is on sleeper though. So it's all on one app. And because half of them are dynasty leagues, and just differentiating again, because dynasty goes year round and you're not doing new drafts every year, there's really also not a lot of waiver wires or like having to really worry about what I'm doing week to week in those leagues. They're pretty much set it and forget it, unless there's like an injury or something, or I want to do trades. But it's like those are already pretty much set. So now you're taking about half those leagues. I don't really have to pay no mind, and it's really just my redraft leagues that I'm like, okay, every Tuesday night I got to make sure I put in my waiver claims, and then Wednesday morning I got to make sure I get up at 3 a.m. because most leagues on Eastern Standard Time will run waivers at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday morning. And if you're not up at 3:01 a.m., that means somebody else can get a player you want before you. And I will not let that happen. So I'm known for being like a hawk. I'll get up at 3 a.m. I don't give a shit. I'll take a couple players and then go back to bed. But it's just, again, it's, I got everything on the sleeper, and I'm down to about 20-ish leagues. But dude, I play with guys like, I remember this guy Afganza just kind of casually said like, yeah, I've got 175 leagues, and he manages them because he's a spreadsheet bro. And you have to remember, like, there are data bros out there that you're playing against if you're playing in real hardcore leagues that literally have like Excel spreadsheet databases set up just like to like manage their football leagues, basically. That's how they do it. So there are guys like that. I've never been a guy like that. Again, for me, like even going to like 30 is like, oh my God, my head was spinning and I had to cut it back. So just to give you kind of an idea of where I fit in that world.
The one thing I love about fantasy, and this has nothing to do with like the games. This is just a side thing where you get to smirk, you have a little bit of fun. There's a little bit of creative freedom, but they're the names. The names of fantasy football teams are some of the best things I can possibly see. What is your go-to fantasy name, and what is the favorite one that you've had? Because let me tell you, people, puns are fantasy football team names' best friends.
So I don't have a go-to, because to me that is casual, uncreative, uncouth, and unrepresenting of being the worst fantasy show. So no, we have always had unique names for our teams. I just come up with random stuff. It's usually stuff that just makes me laugh in the moment. So like last year, one of my favorite ones was a Banacana Don't Want None. That had me, and it was because actually last year, weirdly, I ended up with a lot of musically themed ones. So there was a Banacana Don't Want None unless you got buns, hun. But then I also had one that was hey, Pacheco, hey, enemy, like that song from The Mask. So like I have a bunch of stupid ones like that. I have a league that's themed to Lord of the Rings. And so some of the names in there are pretty fun. Like mine is Sauron Through the Sky. There's My Precious Teen, Bilbo Baggins, Your Mom, Seven Rings to Cheat Them, and he's got a picture of Tom Brady, which is really funny. Pigskin Back on the Menu. So there's a lot of great ones. Yeah, just in general, like and I think my favorite one, oh man, my favorite of all time. You know what? It was really funny because it was just like, and it was one of those things where it was like whoever did it first was really clever, but then the other 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 team names that were the same that came after. But I remember when it's an unfortunate incident, but when Ray Rice had the elevator thing where he beat up his wife, Beats by Ray was a team name that was very popular that year. And the first time I saw it, I thought it was really funny. It was less funny the 9,999th time I saw it, but the first time was pretty funny.
Well, we just want to go out and say we do not condone beating up people in elevators, but a good pun in fantasy is just funny. It's not anything other than there for a laugh. One of my favorite ones that I used last year in a family was Deshaun Don't Touch Down There.
Oh yeah, see that's a lot of the Deshaun ones were like the ones last couple of the last seasons. He Who Shall Not Be Massaged was another good one because people were calling him Voldemort. If
I'm going through the music one, I do use one in one of my dynasty leagues. It's For Whom Odell Tolls. It's a Metallica.
Yes. Odell. That's a good one.
Thank you. I always wanted to, like, I'm a big Metallica guy, so I always tried to do that. Like, I had a hockey one. It was Nugent Else Matters. I also used that because I had the kicker Nugent that year as well.
And my hockey ones were really good last year too, actually. So that's the thing is I play multiple fantasy sports. I actually play fantasy hockey and fantasy basketball as well. And some of my team names last year for the hockey and the basketball. So I draft one of my favorites actually. Two of them I'll give you for they were both for basketball. On a team where I drafted Joel Embiid, Tenacious Embiid, I thought was a really great one. The other one was I drafted Benedict Mathurin and McCall Bridges on the same team. So the name of the team was Benedict Cumber Bridges, which I thought was pretty funny. And then the Pastafarians was the other one I liked with my David Pasternak team.
Yeah. It's that to me. It's like I think I get just as giddy as when I'm coming up with a team name as I am after a draft. Like obviously when I'm in a draft, I'm stressed, whatever. But I also love the draft, just the whole suite. Like I think I did.
Sorry, just I was thinking, and my wife actually has this running theme in the hockey leagues where every year she names her team after a different serial killer because we're big true crime like fans and nerds, and that's how we met. Actually, was through a true crime podcast.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So every year she's had like one was the Bakersville Dozen and one was like Gein's Goalies or something like that. Like really funny ones like that.
I feel that there has to be like a Jack Eichel, Jack the Ripper type reference there. There needs to be something, right? But yeah. So I have to ask now because you're talking about wanting to make sure you're an NFL fan. Obviously, I know you're an NFL fan. I see the terrible towel behind you. Safe to assume you're a Pittsburgh Steelers guy.
Yep.
What led you to becoming a Pittsburgh Steelers fan?
So I mean that towel, I got it in Pittsburgh. I was at that game. It was in 2005. And it was the home opener that year. It was Ben Roethlisberger's rookie season. So they were actually 0-1 because in the first game, that was when Tommy Maddox got injured. He was actually the starter that year. And Ben started the second game of the season, the home opener, like I said, because the first game was a road game. And they beat the shit out of the Tennessee Titans that day. It was fantastic. It was like 36 to, it was like a 30 burger. Like they beat them 30 to like 15 or something. It wasn't close. And even like the 15 was like they got a touchdown real late, like when it didn't matter.
Yeah.
And I remember like Roethlisberger hit like a 60-yard bomb to Antoine Randall real early in the game. Willie Parker, shout out to Willie Parker. Fast Willie Parker had a great game. He had over 100 rushing yards, I think, that game, or he was close to it. Anyways, he had a really good game. So yeah, that was the first time we had ever gone live to a game. But to answer your question, actually, my dad, lifelong Steelers fan. There's a huge contingent in Ontario, especially Southern Ontario.
Also here, we have, I still see it to this day, but somebody actually painted Pittsburgh Steelers yellow and black all over their car.
Oh, wow.
And there's all the decals, all like the logos and all that. And yeah, there's watch parties. There's a Steelers nation here. I don't know how, because I am not a Steelers fan, but I have been followed by a lot of Steeler Nation kind of things. I think they're trying to recruit, but yeah, I'm not turning my gold in. I'm not turning my gold in.
How I think, you know what it is Canadians identify with the mentality of the team. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the colors. I think it's a combination of the both, really. I think because the color scheme obviously is incredibly appealing, the black and gold. But then when you also talk about, again, like the Steel City, the Steelers, the mantra, the toughness, the blue collar mentality, the idea behind the team, that's something that jives with a lot of Canadians, especially when you talk about pockets of Alberta, especially, or like pockets of, like I was saying, in Southern Ontario, where there's like really big contingents. And I'm not even talking about Toronto. I'm talking like outside of it, down in like Peterborough and in Brantford, and then like up as high as like Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder
That's
Bay.
actually where Chris Best is from, is Sault Ste. Marie.
So I'm from there too, actually.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I grew up in the Sioux like through all my teenage years. I'm actually born in Toronto, and we moved to Sault Ste. Marie. I was 13 years old, and I lived there from 13 until I was 21. I graduated from Sir James Dunn High School. Shout out to them. Before Sir James Dunn unfortunately closed down and they demolished it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, Chris Bass is going, yes, Sioux boys.
It's not the greatest now, but I mean, it was fine when I was there. It kind of is like, not the best now. It's so stupid. It's like even something as simple as like they cut the Greyhound line, which does, if you don't know what that is, it's basically what I would call like the transcontinental bus. It's the bus that's supposed to go from one side of Canada to the other. It's how you're supposed to be able to travel if you're poor. And they said, screw the Sioux. We're just not going to go there anymore. And so the service now basically stops in Sudbury. And then I don't know how, they must just bypass, go straight up to Thunder Bay or something. But they used to go through the Sioux because it's like the only reasonable place to stop. But now they just said, nah. And they just cut the service.
Yeah, Chris Bass is saying night before they turned it into a temporary movie studio.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I just kind of want to like change a little bit of gears a little bit, because I mean I can geek over about the NFL the whole time. But this is partially a wrestling show as well. But before we get into that, I just want to say you are also a hockey fan, correct? And I'm saying this because Chris Best, he is from the Sioux. He's also a Montreal Canadiens fan. What's your favorite team?
They don't exist anymore. It was the Quebec Nordiques, and if they ever come back, it will still be the Quebec Nordiques. It's a weird story because again, I'm from Toronto, and I love Toronto teams. When I tell you, I am a diehard Raptors fan. Like I get emotional thinking about their championship run. Like that shit meant the world to me. I fucking hate. Sorry, I apologize for. I hate the Leafs.
It's okay when I go. Hey, you know what? Leaf hate is fine here.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't.
I just
stop
put the profanity button on the Spotify. That's fine. Just
Yeah,
YouTube, chill
Yeah, let me
YouTube. It's just a word.
pull it back. I do not like the Toronto Maple Leafs. I do not like them, Sam. I am. I am like I gotta be one of the few people in Toronto that went to a Toronto Leafs game and actively booed them off the ice. They were playing the Anaheim Ducks that night, and I was a big Ducks fan because of the movies. It was like, to me, it was like the Nordiques or the Ducks. Those were my teams.
You know what jersey I almost wore on it? Is my Adam Banks Hawks jersey I bought. Just the And I also have a District 5 one. If they make it, I'm getting a Hendrix USA one. It's going to be the only USA jersey I ever get. But then I got to get one of those Eden Hall Warriors jerseys as well.
Man, yeah, no, that I literally like those are like movies that were like iconic to my childhood.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the Leafs traditionally, I always hated them, and it was almost even funnier because they stole Sundin from us. The Nordiques, I don't think people realize Matt Sundin played for the Nordiques and then went to Toronto later in his career. And we also had Joe Sakic, who was my favorite player. But yeah, they lost the team and they moved to Colorado, and I kind of followed a little bit, but I never really was like as into hockey, even though I'm Canadian. Like I didn't play. I can't skate. I'll tell you that right now. I cannot skate. I can play road hockey just fine. I just can't.
Don't worry, neither can anybody on Toronto.
Yeah, the ice skating thing just was one of those things that I just never could get really. So hockey wasn't for me, but I'll tell you this, Sioux Greyhounds, renowned throughout Ontario for being one of the best Northern Ontario hockey teams, and that holds true. And I have been to multiple Sioux Greyhound games against my will and also willingly. There was a time where I didn't want to go. It just wasn't my thing. My dad would pay me to like take my sister or something. But then as I got older, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And I'm seeing guys like play here that are going to be playing in the NHL. So like, guys like Jeff Carter, for example, was captain of our team for a long time. And then he played in the NHL. And, seeing him make that transition was actually one of the things that really...
I think he just retired too.
Yeah, that was one of the things that really, transitioned me into being like, instead of kind of being condescending about it and being like, oh, I don't care about hockey. It was like, you know what, actually, this is a cool thing that's representative of my city, and I shouldn't be like a douche about it. You know what I mean? So that was one of those things where it's like a lot of people have like negativity and hate where I feel like it's not deserved. And I try to catch myself when I'm being that way and try to be like, no, you know what? This maybe it's not your favorite thing, but be appreciative of, again, you saw history. You saw Jeff Carter literally go from his amateur career through the pros, and now, like you said, he just retired recently.
Yeah, and that's a thing too. I know we got to always remember, and it's just same thing in wrestling. But like these guys are human beings as well. They're just following a dream. All they want to do is do everything they hope for when they were 4 years old, and they're just in the position where they can actually do it. So it's fun to boo them when they're on the team that you don't like, but at the same time, when it's all said and done, they're human beings as well.
With wrestling, though, that's a perfect segue because I've always watched it. I've always been removed from it because being in Canada and where I've lived in Canada, it's like it wasn't accessible really for me to just pop into a Monday Night Raw or SmackDown. I've been to small local shows. I had never been to a Raw until recently. Being there live changed my entire perception of the industry, the show, the business, whatever you want to call it. Just like, man, yeah, it's one thing to like boo within the character of the show and like, like you said, booing the team that you hate, it's fine. Taking it to a personal level is insane. Please seek therapy. But then also the negativity, even from like regular fans, I feel like is something that becomes so prevalent that we forget to be appreciative of like, hey, this is like really cool entertainment. And again, when I was there live in the Bell Center for the Montreal Raw, the taping with Sami Zayn versus Chad Gable for the IC title, I got to watch Sami. I got to see that really cool entrance through the crowd. I got to see him win and defend his title, and then the turn from Gable, like being there live in the arena was next level. But it's like even simple things of like when I was watching the main event tapings, or when I watched they did the speed taping, like when being there live, it was cool. It was really cool. There was no way around it. The main event thing was Xia Li, who actually ended up getting cut like not that long after, versus Natalya. And it's like Natalia is a perfect example of like people kind of crap on her now because she's been around for so long. And it's like, man, you know what though? People in the Bell Center were sure happy to see her. I was happy to see her. They had a great match. Xia Li's entrance was banging. Like being there live for it was totally different than, what you see on TV. So it was like, even just something is what you would call insignificant, right? Because that's the thing. It's like a fan at home is just gonna be, oh, main event. Who cares? It's insignificant. It's like, no, it's not. When you're there for the show, it's a totally different thing. And it was, like I said, having that perspective now, and also just as I've gotten older, really trying to force myself, because I'm a pessimistic person by nature, really trying to force myself to be more positive and appreciate things for what they are instead of what they are not. Pro wrestling has kind of changed for me the last couple of years, where it's like now the only things I get really critical about are like one of my big pet peeves, and I've said it on multiple shows, is just as a writer, I don't like when you world build and then just completely disregard like the stuff that you yourself set up in your own story. You know what I mean? Like you set up all these like characters and you built a world and they have like rules and paradigms that they operate within to a certain degree. And if they go against that, there's a reason for it. And that's the storytelling. And it's like, if you just flaunt that, then you just have nothing. Like you're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. Yeah. And so it's like, that's the only time I'll really kind of get critical now of like the storytelling of what I'm watching. But, even something like AEW, which I've been highly critical of as of late, again, if I was there for a live show, those matches, and individually, a lot of time, those matches are bangers. And even if they don't have like super long stories, but I can still appreciate them for what they are. And yes, they could be more, and I'll talk about it. I can point it out and be critical, but without being a hater and being like, oh, this is awful, and blah. And there's times where I'll say it facetiously, kind of like, when you're online too. Like I made a comment, AEW is just turning into WWE from Wish. And it's because, I say that jokingly, but it's because like, yeah, the stuff like with the Learning Tree and Chris Jericho, get this off my TV. This was supposed to be the alternative to this kind of stuff, where like the ratings for these guys, like their actual like win-loss ratings were supposed to matter. It was supposed to be more representative of professional wrestling as compared to sports entertainment. And it just feels like they've gone very far away from that as of late. And it's like, well, that was what you built your company on ultimately. Like that was the mantra of like what made me a fan of you in the first place. And so if you're going to go directly against that, well, then that causes me to question my fandom in a sense of like, okay, well, now I got to find a new reason to watch.
Yeah, and I'm always someone that I still go back to that original press conference that they had when they announced AEW. And I remember the Young Bucks going up and saying that they're going to change and revitalize tag team wrestling as we know it. And then the first thing I saw was, oh, well, it was cool because you had an actual tag team win the tag titles originally, but then you put it on two singles guys that were just thrown together. And I'm just like, you guys aren't doing anything different than what I'm seeing from the other place. Now I'm questioning whether or not you guys are actually staying true to your word, or else you're just deemed to make the same mistakes because you don't have that long-term goal. You don't have that long-term vision. I don't know. Like I'm not behind the scenes. I'm not there. I'm not a part of the creative team there. So I can't say for sure, but all I'm seeing is what I'm watching. And you're telling me tag team is going to be revitalized, and I'm seeing the exact same thing to what people are criticizing about. So just because it's different doesn't mean it's better. It just means that it's different.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And there's I've said there's a couple different problems in AEW right now, but I feel like the biggest thing is just they have a too much problem. On every possible level, they have too much. They have too many shows, they have too many stars, they have too many titles, they have too many factions, they have too many random segments that don't mean anything with Tony Khan just popping up for no reason. They just got too many things going on and not enough real thorough lines for me to kind of really, get that meat on the bone or latch onto. And that's why it's like, I feel like with AEW, it's totally fine for me to turn it off for a month and turn it back on in a month, and it's going to be the exact same thing. I will have not really missed anything at all. I can just do that and watch, and it's great. Every now and again, when they have a pay-per-view, I might tune in and watch some of the matches, but it's like you're not getting me to commit to your weekly programming that way.
Yeah. Chris Best is saying the big announcements that ultimately go nowhere. But yeah, I want to kind of transcend on from that because you said you want to watch something that like you can latch onto right now. This week on NXT, I believe wrestling fans got something they could latch onto when they in the main event they saw All Ego at Ethan Page show up, but before that, we saw TNA's Knockouts champion Jordan Grace appear to challenge Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's title at NXT Heatwave, thus confirming that there is now a working relationship between WWE and Total Nonstop Action to the point fantasy booking for pro wrestling has gone into another level because now all of a sudden people are talking about Moose coming over, Joe Hendry coming over, but who's going to go over is Drew McIntyre, AJ Styles, Xavier Woods, everyone who was in TNA before. I want to ask you, did you happen to catch that? And if so, what were your thoughts and how do you feel as a wrestling fan this is going to do for not only TNA, but also for WWE and NXT?
So it's not just those companies because obviously on the other side of it, you have AEW doing the Forbidden Door stuff, working with NJPW and I think it's CMLL is what it's called, the
Yes.
Mexican wrestling league.
Yeah.
And it's funny because again, WWE is doing the Forbidden Door stuff, but they're doing it right because they approach it from a less is more approach where it's like, I didn't get every single TNA person showing up. Like Ethan Page, yeah, him showing up is a big deal. But he was in AEW kind of not being used. And so it's funny because Ethan Page's jump to me, I didn't even really think of TNA right away. I was like, oh yeah, AEW, he just left AEW. So it's like I know he's representing TNA to a degree, but it's like to me the big one was Jordan Grace. And
yeah. No, I'm just saying that Ethan Page was something you can latch onto because it was something entertaining. Yeah,
but he's been through that system also, so there's also that tie-in to TNA. So that's why I liked it a lot because it's not just that you stole someone from AEW; it's that you are also continuing the tie-in to TNA, right? So you're doing two birds at once. And then on top of it, you get Jordan Grace, who is the TNA Knockout Women's Champion. I don't know if they still call it the Knockout Women. I don't really watch TNA, to be perfectly honest, but Jordan Grace, I know her. She's a huge deal. And so her coming over and challenging Roxanne Perez, again, champion versus champion in a match like that, you're elevating both of the characters because I know who Jordan Grace is, and now I get to see her in a primetime spot in a sense, even though it's on NXT. NXT's been cooking as of late. It's almost as good as like in the black and gold days when Adam Cole was there. But then again, like on the other hand, you get just the gravitas of. And I'm curious to see what direction they're going to go with this. If Jordan Grace is just going to win the NXT Women's Championship and carry both, like okay, you're elevating the title, and even if you go the direction of Roxanne Perez beats her, well, now you're elevating Roxanne Perez also and the title. So either way is like a winning situation for WWE. And then when you contrast that with the Mercedes Moné stuff and the CMLL Women's Champion, I'm not even sure what her name is, apologies, coming in to challenge Mercedes Moné, it's like, unless you're a diehard fan of CMLL, I have no idea who this person is, and she's coming in to challenge Mercedes Moné. And the problem with that is, again, in WWE, I can suspend the disbelief of Jordan Grace shows up and gets to go right to the front of the line, because not only did she show up, she showed up on NXT, which is more of their developmental roster as opposed to like showing up on main, right?
Yeah.
Basically, the CMLL, she showed up on main, challenged one of the main champions, skipped the line, but on a show that's supposed to have the rankings matter and all of that. So it's like there's a cognitive dissonance that you are creating yourself. Again, when you are world building and creating rules and parameters that I'm supposed to like kind of adhere to for that specific version of entertainment. And again, there's huge allowances that fans will make. It's the same thing of like superhero movies. I'm not going into a superhero movie being like, this needs to be very realistic. Like my expectations are wildly different. And it's the same thing for pro wrestling, but you also can't have Iron Man punch Captain America in the face in the first movie without telling me why that happened. They built up to that over 3 movies, and then you had them fight. You know what I'm saying? Like they didn't just show up in Avengers 1 and just start. Technically they did, but like you know what I'm saying? Like you built a relationship to get to Civil War, Avengers, Captain America Civil War, which is the 3rd installment of that film, to like have this like cathartic battle between 2 good guys essentially, right? And like they're going to death. That's the kind of storytelling that AEW lacks. Like they don't do the build. You just get Captain America versus Iron Man because they're both really cool, man. They're gonna fight. And that's fine, 10 times, 20 times. They've been around 5 years now. You gotta give me something more.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree. And I think too, one of the things to add on is the difference between the two kind of events is you had the situation that led up to one, whereas another one just came out of the blue, right? Like it was just, hey, Mercedes Moné is now the champ. Oh no, who's next? And then it's big pop here for CMLL champion. And a lot of people might not even know, like you said, not even know who she is. And I think the difference was over on NXT was, okay, it was supposed to be Julia. She gets hurt. Now they're looking for somebody who Roxanne Perez wanted somebody credible for her, not just like a normal somebody in there. She is basically being the ego that says this division isn't good enough for me. I need somebody special. So she's almost asking for that somebody to when now all of a sudden they bring in Jordan Grace, who's wearing a championship, identifying that she is somebody, because in wrestling, a championship means and symbolizes that you've done something pretty significant when you're called a champion. So now when you're coming out, you're not going to say you're not nobody. 1, she towers over you. 2, she's also a champion. So now it's a big deal. You've built it up without really having to say much. Whereas the other one, it's kind of just, here you go. Here's a present for the sake of giving a present. This is hey, we're giving you a gift because this is an important time.
And even
there's that reason.
The general audience of WWE is going to be more aware of who Jordan Grace is, because this isn't the first time she's showing up. She showed up at Royal Rumble and it was a huge pop then. And so you already had the tease at the Royal Rumble. And now it goes, so that's in the back of everyone's minds when you are telling the story. And now she shows up on NXT and all of a sudden it's like she's back on WWE TV. It's not like she's just showing up for the first time and nobody knows who she is either, too. So it's like not only does she present as this awesome champion because of her physical presence, her demeanor, and the championship that she carries, But the fact that I have seen her on WWE TV before, I do know that there's been like whisperings and rumorings of the TNA stuff going on for a while now. It's been going on since Royal Rumble, aka January, and we're in June. That's 6 months.
Yeah.
So again, they slow roll stuff a lot in WWE nowadays, and they do things where they drop a lot of hints before they do stuff, almost to the point that they beat you over the head with it. If you're really paying attention, there's a lot of foreshadowing in the production that they do. And again, it's not always not every story has to be the bloodline front and center for 4 years for them to tell effective stories. They do it all the time. Even I just talked about on the wrestling show that I did yesterday for my channel, such a simple story beat they had with Apollo Crews and Andrade, two guys that are practically forgotten about on the roster ultimately. But Apollo comes out, cuts a little in-ring promo, like with just the camera on him of, hey, I'm back on SmackDown. And you have the thorough line of Andrade's trying to be recruited to Legado del Fantasma. Angel comes down during the match, interrupts the match, and costs Apollo the win. There's this thing where it's like, then Apollo just F's off and like is never heard of or seen again. And it's like, no. In literally the very next segment, Angel goes backstage to confront Andrade and say, hey, you clowned me in front of my group. What's up with that? And he gets attacked by Apollo, who says, hey, stay out of my matches. Such a simple story beat. And now you protected Apollo Crews in the loss. He took the loss because it was interrupted. He looked strong because he attacked the guy that interrupted him. And Andrade got a needed win on SmackDown. Win, win, win. That's how you do storytelling and booking and wrestling.
Well, and that's just the thing. If you're going to want me as a casual fan to care about somebody, there has to be that reason, that why. Because the word why is the most important part in television history. Because if you can't explain the why to me as a fan, I'm just going to do one of these and turn the channel or turn it off. So if you're not investing me on an emotional level, I'm not going to invest my time and everything to it. You're just going to either be background noise or you're not even going to be noise at all. And that's the main thing, in my opinion, to what makes a good wrestling show to a bad wrestling show or just an okay one.
And it's funny because, like, for the longest time, WWE was the one not doing any of that. Like, through basically most, I would say the majority, and people act like it was just the last 2-3 years. I'm sorry, but no. There were definitely moments, because that's how he booked, was through moments. But the entire 2010 to 2020-ish, whenever he finally, gave it up, era of Vince McMahon sucked. Like, if you talk about just the week-to-week storytelling, a lot of dog crap. But it was like you would get the moments, because, I mean, and I almost hate that, because in wrestling, I feel like we almost give too much credit, in a sense of like, and again, this is just me thinking out loud as a writer. One of the hardest things I have to do when I am writing a story is, besides world building, which is already hard enough, is building characters, right? I have to create all these different characters with different personalities that interact in different ways. And I got to decide all that. You are given all of your characters in wrestling. They already pretty much, you can modify and have them grow and develop and blah, blah, blah. But you are given the base of dozens of characters to work with within a world that has been built over time. So the world is already built and the characters are there. So one of the things I've always said is, if I was running a wrestling company and a member of creative came to me and said, oh, we got nothing for that guy, I'd be like, I'm so sorry, but you no longer have a job here. If you're a creative person and you're telling me you can't come up with a story for a character that already exists in a world that already exists, then you have no business being here, because I'm not going to pay you to do nothing. What are we talking about here? The characters are already there. So
Go, sorry,
I really hate this idea of like, oh well, we can't tell the stories. It's like, no, you have everything you need to tell the story. All right, don't try and tell me again as a writer that like, oh, you can't come up with something for XYZ. It's so easy. It's easy when you already have all the tools right there.
Yeah, I was going to say at the very least, don't ever accept the fact you have nothing. Understand that, okay, I might be stuck, but there's something going on here that I might just need a second opinion on. I need to collaborate with someone just to expand that, because it's just like any idea. You can almost talk yourself out of a good idea. We all do that. We're all guilty of talking ourselves out of pursuing a good idea. But if we can get that one person to help kind of spin that wheel just a little bit more, and then that helps us go, that's just being someone that understands that, hey, this is how I can help myself too and motivate myself a little bit too. But yeah, if your job is a creative writer, in my eyes, I'm with you. You can never be fine accepting the fact that you have nothing. That is you failing at your task.
Yes, exactly. It would be like me going out in the ring as a wrestler and doing 4 moves of doom and then just refusing to ever grow and learn anything else. You know what I'm saying? Like, but without the personality. I'm sorry. Like, let's say I did that, but with Lance Storm's personality, I'm not going to make it very far in the wrestling business.
Yeah, and it was funny because I was talking to somebody last night because of shocking people. I made my return in ring to Edmonton in 18 months last night. I won too, by the way, if people care.
Nice.
Yeah. But in the back, I'm talking to one of the guys. I'm not gonna say who. Kayfabe brother. But yeah, talking to somebody, and we're just talking about the psychology of something. And I was like, what I loved is I didn't have to do 100 different moves to make the people care. I just had to interact with them, because my job, yes, it's being a pro wrestler, but my job is also to entertain to the people who are paying to come here. That is what they are paying to do. They are paying to get entertained by the performers, and they are also paying to get away from whatever's going on in their life as a distraction. So it's my job to fulfill that need for them. Yes, I do it in a way where professional wrestling is part of that performance, but it's not the only part of that performance. So if at the end of the day, you can interact with the people, you can make them cheer you, you can make them boo you, but at the very least, they care about you and they want to come back, you've hit a home run as a professional wrestler in the local scene. It is completely a different ballgame when you go onto TV and do all that. I understand that. But that is something as a performer you always have to keep in the back of your head. Instead of just always having the best match or the best whatever, understand that you're there for your live audience that's around you. Because if you forget about that live audience, they forget about you. So nothing in what you do in that squared circle matters.
Well, and I've never been a professional wrestler, obviously. I'm just going to say that I've never tried to get in the ring. That's not my thing. I'm not trying to jump off turnbuckles and go through stuff. But the one thing I've always, I think I would be good at more like the manager side, because I don't really want to have to do all the. But in a world, let's just pretend in a world where I was like an extremely physical person, like the psychology part is the part that comes easy to me. I feel like, where it's like one thing that drives me nuts on the indie scene when I'm watching guys is I really hate when they do like the power up spot and then lose immediately after. I think that's silly. Like for you to just be like, I'm the greatest in the world and I'm the strong, and then you lose like 5 seconds later. It's like and then I again the mentality there. I'm like, I don't know what you were going for. It's like, and it's not like the spot was like interrupt. It's like they hit the move, and that's the other thing of like, man, I do come from a little bit of the school of like, please don't use Canadian destroyers as just like an arm drag. Like, can we just stop this? Like, and there's certain guys where I can appreciate when they do it because they do it at such a high level. But it's like, if you are not Ricochet versus Will Ospreay, can we stop just not selling moves basically and just like this, like, again, it's like you said, the psychology of what and how you're doing, or it's how and why you're doing what you're doing matters so much more than what you are doing. You know, hitting a suplex, like even, and that's there's technical aspects and then there's ring psychology aspects. So just as like an example, a triple suplex, okay? I really hate watching Dominic Mysterio do triple suplexes on Monday Night Raw because he always rolls the wrong way. And it actually just drives me nuts. Because even though I didn't wrestle professionally, I wrestled amateur for like 3.5 years. And I know he's rolling the wrong way because it just goes against your body. And I can tell that the other guy is having to go against his body and it looks awkward. And so it's like, that's a technical aspect of doing it wrong. The psychology aspect is just doing the triple suplex and then and then just right up on the top with no, like, you know what I mean? And then you get to the top and it's like, then you're going to take your, no, there needs to be more deliberation in what you're doing. Right. And that's, I think, the most common mistake on independent scenes. And, you know, when you talk about AEW, again, it's like you going for these crazy sequences all the time. And then it's like at a certain point, though, like the crazy sequences get to the point where it's like dudes are doing Canadian destroyers on the edge of the apron and then 17 super kicks to the face. And all they get is a freaking 2 count. And the match goes for another 15 minutes after. And it's like, what the hell are we doing?
And the best part, it's from someone that you don't even know their name because they're from the Forbidden Door and you've never heard of them before.
Yeah. Oh, but that's where I'm saying, like, you know, it's fine if you want to create a programming where you know I'm going to come in and out. If you know I'm going to watch a show or a pay-per-view and then maybe not watch for several weeks or months and then come back in, and you want it to be that way, and you know your diehards aren't going to leave you no matter what. Like Dave Meltzer's going to give you 5 stars on every match, no matter what.
Unless you're WWE.
Well, that's why I said if it's an 5 stars every match, it doesn't matter. You know, he gave Chris Jericho and that dog stinky match like 2.5 stars or something. And I was like, yeah, this man is washed. This man is washed. You gave Jericho any stars, you're washed in 2024. I'm sorry. I love Chris Jericho. I really do. This man needs to stop. This man needs to stop.
Chris Best is coming in saying this is why the Raw Patrol, cheap plug by the way, whenever we see a backstage promo, we always say watch the background because one story is going on, we see another starting. And that's like, to me, just a different level of being a creative writer and then performing it is understanding a story within a story. That's just advanced. AEW, please don't go advanced. Just worry about doing simple and then get to that level. You know, we got to crawl before we run. Don't confuse the steps, please. But Jack, I just want to let you know we are kind of running kind of in that time frame. So if by chance you ever want to come back, I just also want to extend not even a forbidden door. It's just an open door policy here. If you want to come back for round 2, you're more than welcome. But before we let you go, I'm going to put that ticker on again. Let everybody know where the people can find you, what you have going on, and just let us know a little bit more so we can know, Jack.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me on the show. I honestly could have just sat here and talked wrestling with you for like another hour. But yes, I will love to come back on the show in the future. We'll set something up off screen. But as far as everyone out there, thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already hit the like button for Chris here, make sure you do that. And if you want to follow my shows, again, basically they're all on the same channel. I'm easy to find. Whoop, right here, Jack Lucenay. You just search that, you'll find me. On YouTube, it's at Jack Lucenay. On TikTok, Twitter, all of it, it's just under my name, but it is called The Worst Sports Channel. I do pro wrestling and I do fantasy football. And so there's The Worst Fantasy Show, which is for all your fantasy football needs. The Worst Wrestling Podcast, which is I basically recap wrestling stuff and talk about wrestling. And then the third one, which is my favorite, is the Worst Interview Show. And basically once a week, I get to interview somebody in content creation, whether in the wrestling space or usually in fantasy football. But I've had tons and tons of amazing guests, especially in the fantasy football space. Like I've had like some true OGs in the space and like actual heavy hitters. So highly recommend that show, really, the Worst Interview. But yeah, everything, like I said, you can just find it always at Jack Lucenay.
Yeah, and one of the things I love too is just like wrestling, fantasy football. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. There's always something else you can learn. It's always great to kind of just watch somebody. You never know what you'll pick up. You may have even known it from day one. It just maybe got forgotten along the way. So make sure you're checking everything out for Jack Lucenay. Jack, I just want to take this time to once again say thank you so much. It was an honor just to get to know you a little bit more, nerd out about fantasy football, nerd over about some wrestling because, well, that's what we do. For everyone, please take the great time to follow him. Also, make sure you're giving me a follow in the links that you'll see in the outro video. Please have a great Sunday. Be safe. And remember, well, I always say go Saints, but because tonight it's game 6, Oilers versus Stars. Oilers 1 game away from that Stanley Cup final. Let's go Oilers.
Yo, I got money on the Oilers too, so double down on let's go Oilers.
McDavid, take the wheel, my friend. Anyway,
I got some underdog stacks with McDavid and Hyman. I need them to score some points. Let's go.
Oh, they're on my fantasy team, so yes, I'm in agreement. Yeah, go Oilers, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.